Hey everybody, I just want to share with you some really cool plugins. I don't get a whole lot of chance to cover these in my courses for lynda.com because they're not part of Illustrator out of the box, meaning it doesn't come with the application Adobe Illustrator when you purchase it. These are third-party plugins created by a company based out of the UK called Astute Graphics. And I think they're very valuable because it makes building vector art more intuitive than the core tools in Adobe Illustrator. And I want to demonstrate to you a couple things using these plugins, but mainly a new feature in VectorScribe 2, which in my opinion is incredibly useful for specifically certain types of artwork. In this case, a linear line illustration. And like all of my illustrative designs, everything starts off in analog. I work it out by drawing it out first. Therefore, I know what I'm going to create before I create it. Here's a sketch of a linear face. And of course, I'm going to build my vector art on it. This is nothing more than just one continuous stroke. This happens to be a 1-point stroke. And I'm going to not build the whole thing for you right now, but just build this last part of his chin to show how I use one of the plugins that comes with VectorScribe and shows you why I feel it's super valuable. So I'm going to zoom in so you can see what I'm doing here. Now, I should point out that they do have what's called the InkScribe tool. This is like a replacement for the pen tool. That works great. But I'm so used to using the pen tool as it is in Adobe Illustrator that I don't use that one as much as all the other plugins. So in this case, I'm going to start with this Bezier point, anchor point, I'm sorry, here. And we're just going to continue building from that point. And it's all about knowing where to place your anchor points and how much to pull out your, in this case, your anchor handles. And I don't worry about pulling out my anchor handles all the way at this point because I'm going to adjust them using one of their plugins. So that's what I call the rough build. I'll go back in now and using the VectorScribe plugin, I will go to what's called the PathScribe tool, this one. And this allows you to grab anywhere on a hand on the path and just pull it. So that works great. You can also grab the anchor handles once you have it. And one thing you can notice is, let's say the anchor handle was here. If I pull this over, notice how an S, bink, will show up. That means this is now a smooth transition on that anchor point. That's what I want here. So we're going to pull this out a little more. Then we're going to go ahead and adjust our path to align with our underground drawing. I don't worry about breaking these at this point because the next step of my process is fixing anything I broke in order to shape the path. So we're just getting it closer to the final location. So that looks pretty good. Now I'll go back in, I'll select all my anchor points that should be smooth anchor points. And we'll use this up here, convert selected anchor point smooth. That fixes all those. I go back in, and this is where I'll finesse the position, pull out the handles more if they need to be. So you can see, and I'll do this to create the entire illustration, to create all the base vector shapes for this linear line illustration. And here, we'll probably move that over. And so that's how I go about using the VectorScribe plugin, specifically the PathScribe tool, to mold and shape my vector points, or my paths, that is. So I can grab anywhere on a path. Doesn't matter where you grab. You could grab here and pull this out. You can grab this. You can select anchor points with this. Doesn't matter. So that's a great plugin. Now once I have all my vector shapes, in this case the one continuous line stroke, in this case it's a 1-point stroke, I'll now change the weight of that and turn it into just a thicker line stroke, in this case a 2.5 point stroke. And sometimes when I work in this style, a client wants one continuous weight for an illustration. I've done a lot of pharmaceutical company illustrations where they use one continuous weight. Other times they want a little more personality to it. And one of the best features, in my opinion, that's been added to Adobe Illustrator over the last few years is one called the width tool. And that's over here, right here. We'll select that now. And what the width tool does is it allows you to go in on any path and do just that, add widths. We're going to zoom in here and go back to the width tool, and you can see I can grab any part of the path. I tend to play off of the areas I've laid down an anchor point. That way later I know exactly where those control points are. But you don't have to do it directly over an existing anchor point. You could choose to do it like in the middle here if you wanted. But I'll just go through my whole artwork and I'll just start making these thick and thin decisions, deciding what I want to be thick, what I want to be thin, and I can control these. Once I set it, I can come back and thin up another thing or add thickness somewhere else. And so it's very flexible. This plugin, unlike a lot of this feature, unlike a lot of features in Illustrator when added, is pretty intuitive. That's not always the case when they add new features. Many times it doesn't give you a whole lot of control. This is pretty flexible in that regard, so it works really well. And I like to keep my stroke, I always keep it with a round corner join, and I keep a rounded end cap. So where my artwork comes to an end has a nice little round on it here and here. And the reason why I do that, it just, in my opinion, it just looks better on the final art instead of being blocked fat end. So I'll go throughout this entire art and I'll add in thick and thins. And once again, if I select this and I go Command Y, this is just a stroke. So what the width tool is doing is it's showing me how it will display using the width tool to add thicks and thins. Now on an illustration like this, it can add a lot of emotion to add these thicks and thins into it, and this works great. Now when I do this, once again, this is still just a one stroke. Now what it will show in your stroke panel will be the widest area that you've applied the width tool to is what the weight will show. So that's probably picking up an area like right here by his eye, or on the inset of his eye here, where it gets to a maximum width of 8.248 points. It's not going to show you the width such as on the top part of his mouth right here, which is thinner. So it defaults to the largest width you've set using the width tool. Now I always keep a version of my artwork with the widths being editable, meaning I can go back to the width tool and I can adjust things. Let's say on this, actually let's not do that, let's try here. I can go back, woo, way fast. I can go back in and let's say I wanted him to have caterpillar eyebrows. You know, I don't, but it allows me to still go in and edit it. It's editable, and it's always smart to keep a version of this, and I'm going to show you why. So let's say we now want to commit to this. We don't want it to remain a stroke. We want it to turn into actual art, which is just a fill of a color. And I'm going to show you how you do that in Illustrator. Like any other feature, you have to kind of commit to it. In this case, in Illustrator, it's called expand. we're going to expand an appearance. Now, if you look at the PathScribe panel, which is part of the VectorScribe plugin, it tells us right now this only has 90 anchor points that make up this entire art. That means our entire vector stroke path only has 90 anchor points to make it up. That's fine. I just want to point out that number because it'll demonstrate the problem in Adobe Illustrator. So if we go to Object and we go down to Expand Appearance, this is how you commit to something in Illustrator. You get this. Yeah, it's a monstrosity of useless, unneeded, and just a stink load of anchor points. This makes the art virtually impossible to edit with any kind of precision or accuracy now. Hence why in my layers I always keep an editable version to go back to in case I screw something up. So when you commit to it, when you expand it, it goes from 90 points on this illustration to a whopping 2,659 points, as you can see over here. This is just sloppy coding. This is just bad software engineering by Adobe. There's no two ways around it. It's inexcusable to do this, and that may seem a little harsh, but I'm going to demonstrate why that is. And I think this new plugin for VectorScribe demonstrates why that is, because they manage to pull off the incredible, which should be just inside Illustrator to begin with, but isn't. You'll also notice this exclamation mark showing up. This means that somewhere in this art now you have redundant points, meaning they're piggybacking on top of one another, and that can cause problems. This is something you'll run into a lot when you expand. Once again, sloppy engineering on Adobe's part. In this case, you'll also notice when you expand, you have these overlapping areas of your art, especially where the path, if I zoom in, comes to, I mean, visually it looks okay, but technically it's this way. So what you want to do to get rid of those is just select the art, and you want to now make sure it's a compound path by uniting all of it, and that usually gets rid of those problems. Now you can see we still have redundant points, and one other awesome aspect of the VectorScribe plugin is it gives you the ability to remove them. This warns you with this exclamation mark, and it's a button, so all you have to do with the artwork selected is hit it, and you can see right now it's at 2463. We hit that and it goes down to 2453. So there was 10 anchor points that were piggybacking on one another. So it fixes that problem. That's another nice little benefit of using, oops, my bad, snip that, of using the VectorScribe plugin. So you can see that we still have an ungodly amount of anchor points. So we're going to be getting rid of these, and I'm going to show you the new plugin in Adobe Illustrator. Now we're going to stay in keyline mode because it's easier to demonstrate it, and we're going to zoom in on his hairline. So you can see that we have just hundreds and hundreds of just unneeded anchor points. Now the feature in VectorScribe, if we go under the PathScribe tool, hold down, we're going to go to what's called Smart Remove Brush Tool. And with that selected, you can double click on that and set how big you want that brush. So it'll basically go off of your size to determine what areas are going to be affected. In this case, we have it about 53 pixels. Now, all this you do is you click and brush over the content, and you can see how it's smartly removing the unnecessary anchor points while retaining the necessary ones. Necessary ones meaning the ones needed to keep your art looking the way you created it. And that's the way a smart, intuitive piece of software works. It doesn't mess with your art. It doesn't screw with your production capabilities. It doesn't force you to try to stop creating and figure out why in the hell is it doing this. It just works. And this is the way the final art should actually look when you expand it in Illustrator, but it doesn't. Hence the whole sloppy engineering, in my opinion. So there you go. So I've gone ahead and applied this tool, which is called the Smart Remove Brush tool in VectorScribe plugin, and I've applied it to the top part of his hair. And you can see now, if I go back to preview mode, this is the way it still looks the same. But now, if I ever needed to go in and edit this, it'd be very easy to do so. Now, another nice compatibility is you have right here, you have a couple anchor points that are pretty close because, once again, this has to clean up what Adobe creates. So Adobe's kind of created a sloppy mess here where there's a couple anchor points really close to one another, and that's not working too great. So we're going to try another thing, and now once again we're trying to clean up what Adobe's messed up. So this doesn't always work, but sometimes it does. It also has a Smart Remove button, and so this allows you to go into shapes and within reason you can remove one. So we're going to try to remove this anchor point here and see if we can pull it off using this. We might not be able to. Okay, you can see it does change the art because of the way Adobe translated it when expanded. So in that case, it doesn't work so great. But I do want to show you one where it can work. So right here, I think we'd be safe to Smart Remove that, so we can go in and make these individual decisions and Smart Remove it. So that also works too. So after you use the general Smart Remove to clean up the artwork that Adobe messed up, you can go in and select specific ones and do further cleanup, such as that. So those are more than two features I wanted to show you in regards to the VectorScribe plugin, because it does make production go a lot better. And so remember, we had 26. If I select this again, the top part's clean, the bottom part is just absolutely insane. But overall, just in the amount we cleaned up there, we took it from 2,600 anchor points and we cut out about 700 anchor points. Now it's at 1926. But on our final art, which I'll show you here pre-baked, if I select this, we took it down to 267 anchor points to create the art. And this is the way it really should work when you expand it. You should be able to go from your width tool and you should be able to get this if the engineers know what they're doing. And thankfully, Astute Graphics has some very talented engineers who not only understand the technical aspects of coding, obviously, they understand how creatives work, and they understand that this is what you're after. You're certainly not after this. And so that's why it's smart to use a plugins like VectorScribe to improve your artwork and to make creating of your artwork not just easier, but give you the control you need to create what you want.